In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace a faulty Tesla wall charger. So hopefully, as you can see, we have a single blinking red light and it blinks 3 times. For this charger, that error message basically just means that it thinks the charger is too hot and is either limiting charging to 20 amps or is not charging at all. Now, I know that this is faulty because this error started happening in the middle of the night when it was below 40s and it was not hot. I can feel it's not hot. I can go touch the charging handle and it's not hot, but it's not working anymore. Now, according to what I found on the internet, the temperature sensors on these chargers tend to go bad about after 2 or 3 years, depending on your usage. So the only solution we have now is to replace the charger. Now, one thing I just want to say before we get started is that if you don't know what you're doing or you don't feel confident in what you're doing after you watch this video, you should always consult with a certified electrician. Since this is just a simple replacement, I feel more than confident to be able to do this myself. Now, of course, we are going to be shutting off the breaker before we do this replacement, but you should always be careful around AC power as it is extremely dangerous and it can kill you. All right, with that out of the way, let's get started. All right, so this is a sub panel that my charger is wired into, and it is this 50 amp breaker right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn that off to begin with. Now, before we take the cover off, we should just go ahead and double check that all the lights have turned off so that we know that we do not have live power. To take the charger off, there are 2 hex head screws on the top, and then there are 2 hex head screws on the bottom. We have to remove those first. And for sizing, they use well, I don't know if this is a standard tool size because it's a Wera set, but it's H0P4. I don't think that's a hex size. All right, now that we have the 4 screws off, it's pretty simple. All we're going to do is pull this straight out, and now the charger is disconnected. So what we have is our 3 electrical connections, and again, you should test these again if you have one of those electrical testers to make sure that the lines are not live. We have, from left to right, we have our ground connection, and then we have basically what they call L2 and L1. It's just wired up to one of the poles on the 2-pole breaker that we have here. So these actually don't really matter which way you put them in, but I prefer just to put everything back in the same way I took it out, just for consistency's sake. So just so I don't forget, quick way is just take a picture, green, red, black. Now let's go ahead and disconnect the wires. So these lugs use the same exact size wrench as before. And before I pull these out, I am going to snip the zip ties holding them in. I'm simply going to pull the wires out and twist them off to the side. And you'll notice, even though I know the power is off, I'm still going to try to do my best to not actually touch the exposed connectors, because you should always treat AC power as if it's live. All right, before we take this off, I just want to go ahead and open up the new one and make sure everything is exactly the same. All right, so it does look as if this is identical. So I'm going to go ahead, remove the screws holding it in, and swap out this back plate. Actually, sorry, before I do that, I need to take off this retaining ring that's holding my conduit to the box. Okay. Okay, then again, when I'm taking it off, I want to be careful with my wires. Okay. And then, to reattach the same exact way, this guy pulls right out the bottom. Though I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, I have to drill this out, because I don't think it fits 1-inch conduit by default. Unless they updated it, because I don't think the last one did. No, it does not fit 1-inch conduit by default. So I need to go grab a drill bit. All right, so I have one of these like stepped drill bits. This hole by default is only for 3/4 inch conduit. To find out what size I need to drill it to, I just put it through the old hole and it looked like it was 1 1/4. So I will drill this until we get to there. Okay, so that should be good. Okay, there we go. And of course, everyone's install is going to be different to some extent. Just try to keep it as much the same as your old installation to avoid introducing any new variables or problems, and then you might have to call someone to come in and fix them. Reinstall my screws, and I'm just going to eyeball this. What I'm actually going to do is, these are self-tapping screws. I'm just going to get through the plastic first, and then I'm going to push it through a little bit more and line it up with the old hole. You don't want to overdo it, just enough to hold it snug. Alrighty. So now we want to go ahead and reconnect the wires the exact same way we disconnected them. Okay, so we're going to start with our ground, and we want to try to do some cable management on these so that they basically go back in the way we want them to. And I'm going to go ahead and just back out all these lugs. Okay, put my green on, and before I snug it down, it's best to put a zip tie in first. Okay, so that is through, and now I'm going to make sure my wire is not so far down that it would be clamping the insulation. And there is a torque spec on here. It's 50 inch-pounds, but you don't need to go so far as to buy a torque wrench. You just want to make sure that we're snug enough that it's not going to come out with a little tug test, and that we're not squishing terminals, the wires out of the way of the screw. We want to make sure they're all still clamped. I know I said treat these as if you're live, but I checked them off camera, so I just wanted to make sure these terminals are all twisted decently. And I will do these two the exact same way as I did the ground. And it's important to do it up and down, like coming up and around like this, because if the terminals come loose, they're not going to fall out due to gravity. Whereas if you wire them straight up and underneath and they come loose, there's a chance they could fall out and short something out. Okay, and before we tighten everything up, just do a little tug test on everything. Green feels good. Red feels good. Black feels good. Push these over here. Push them down. And we're going to zip tie them. Okay, so we are ready. Now that everything's wired back up, we can put our new faceplate onto the charger. and then reinstall the 4 screws. Okay. And then once we turn the power on, we have to commission the charger and tell it how we have it set up. Now, on your connector, I'm covering mine up, but you'll get a quick start guide that has on this sticker, it has your Wi-Fi information and the password to log into that. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn the power on so we can do that procedure. Now, upon boot up, it should start the Wi-Fi. So I'm just gonna go into my Wi-Fi settings and choose my connector, and then I'm gonna enter my password. Okay, and then all we need to do is open up our browser, and we go to 192.168.92.1. Once you've gotten to that web page, you should see something like this. The very first thing we want to do, even before we set up Wi-Fi, is go to our installation and make sure we have this set properly. So it defaulted to a 60 amp breaker, but I have a 50 amp breaker, and this is important because you don't want it trying to supply more current than your breaker can handle. Next, I'm just going to go to Wi-Fi and set up my Wi-Fi. Alright, so after mine connected to Wi-Fi, it went ahead and rebooted, and now I'm going to go to software and let it check for update and then install it. One other thing that we can do is we can do access control, and I want only Tesla. And if you want to do only authorized, you have to plug them into your cars first to get the VINs into the charger, and then you can switch it to authorized Teslas only. All right, now that everything is set up, let's see if it works again. And it appears we are charging. If you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing.